April 16th, Lane Community Health Board Education Special Meeting will now be called to order. So you will use the roll.
Yes, Kevin Oliver.
Here.
Denise Diamond. Here.
Austin Foley, excuse absence. He wanted to express that he was saying here, Lawrence, he loves the community and fellow board members so much. And my apologies for not being able to.
Sophie Gibson. Here. Steve Mattel.
Here.
Special meeting.
Zach, can you hear me? I can't hear you. I could hear Celia really well, but I really can't hear anybody else as far as I can tell.
We'll work on the microphone in room 2.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll try to speak louder for you, Steve.
Thanks.
The meeting has been called to order for the purpose of receiving public comment. This portion of the meeting will be 6 p.m. At that time, the special meeting will adjourn and public comment will close. Please note that the board will not engage in a direct discussion or respond to comments made during this time. However, any issues raised will be referred to the president for follow-up and appropriate action. Before we begin public comment, I just want to state a big thank you to President Bulger and all of our staff that made some adjustments so we could have a reception before the meeting tonight for our residents and to open up this public time. And I really appreciate it. With that, Celia, do you have any public comment?
Yes, we have 3 people signed up for public comment. If you could please come to the front right here in the center of the your comment. And we're trying to get to 3 minutes. So it'll be Jerry Russ, followed by Don Archer and Amy Crispio.
Right here? Right up here. If I could beg the indulgence of the chair. We've got the mayor here. I know he wants to welcome you to Lawrence.
Well, I'm not working at Lawrence. Good to see you guys. Am I going to do it that way? But we're just glad to hear. Lawrence is this has been part of our community for a long, long time. And we very much appreciate it. I spent 10 years on the advisory board some years ago. And you provide good service. I know all 3 of my kids pay for part of their college by continuing the credits here, carry forward up by bit. Welcome. We come back soon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. I'm Jerry Russ, 9296 Highway 126 Road, 3 miles. Again, I'd like to welcome you to Florence. Good to see you in this nice, beautiful new building. And thank you for all the improvements you made. Just recently, we had a town hall meeting. And we talked about the issues that we like to see the board pursue. And if I could, I'll just rattle these off real quick. One idea that came up was the idea of a consortium that we could bring various resources together from different colleges, the 17 colleges. We're right in the middle of the Oregon Coast, so that's conducive to reaching up north and south. I'd like to pursue that further. A small business center, it was suggested that a small business center would help businesses buy, sell, relocate, start. I think that's a good one. transportation came up, but I think we were under, I don't think we had the correct information. There are 3 daily buses from Florence to the Eugene, Maine bus station serve our population. One of the most intriguing comments came up was, we want to have a collegiate feel. We want to feel like a college campus. And of course, that isn't something you just wish for. It takes time. And it leads me to the last one, which is expand class offering where possible down here in Florence. With that, I thank you very much. Thanks again for coming to Florence.
Don Gardner.
I'm Doc Archer, and I've got a background in journalism and also a number of friends down the coast. I did a magazine, and I would like to do another magazine. I have a number of people who are senior citizens who are friends of mine because I did a magazine some years ago. And I'd like to talk to those people because they are really well formed with their particular businesses. And they should be honored because they can help with the kids, the youngsters, to teach them the various kinds of business that are available. And it's new stuff that it is not just the old things, and I'd like to help do that. I'd like to teach people how to do professional writing. So those are the kind of things that I'd like to help with.
Andy Riscoia, followed by Sue Wilson.
Hello, I'm Andy Riscoia, School Superintendent here in Florence. We've had plenty of positive interaction with LCC Florence and LCC main campus. Quite a few of our students graduated high school with almost a full year's worth of college under their belt. We have another group of students that probably pulls 20 to 25 credits in for technical ed classes, everywhere from business, info tech, and one of our biggest trends is healthcare. We've got a new group with kids that are taking a certified nursing assistant right now. And LCC Florence has been instrumental in helping us get that partnership off the ground with PSOC locals. And so that's really helping to contribute to our community. We're looking at expanding in the future to offer adult ed and other fields at the high school, because this building just doesn't have a welding shop, doesn't have an oven shop, doesn't necessarily have a true chemistry lab. But those are things that we can arrange with a simple intergovernmental agreement. And I think some of the greater flexibility that's coming up with students being able to take a free class, whether it's in the spring or the summer, if it is a core credit that they're looking for, that frees our students up to take additional classes during the regular school. But again, the college field and the high school schedule don't always line up time by time. It's not every day from 8:30 to 9:15. But again, letting kids take some of those classes off cycle so that they can find something else to fill out their regular day is important. And so there's been plenty of positive growth and getting things streamlined for our teachers for licensure and approval to teach LCC courses has really kind of strengthened the offering. So again, thank you for being here and thank you for helping support LCC Florence and Cicely School District.
Sue Wilson.
Hello, I'm Sue Wilson, Superintendent in Mapleton School District. Went out this direction. Okay, remember, and couple things. I want to first thank LCC. They approved pilot with us this year where students have free summer or that free tuition-free course in the spring and the summer. We don't have a lot of kids. I was like, any chance they could do it anytime during the school year in any of our high schools? And they said yes. And what we're doing is we've been able to get kids signed up and use our educational assistants to support their success in that class during the school day. And we were talking about this with the advisory committee last night, here. Realized we had been talking about adding more courses to the offering center, which we still are advocating for, but realized actually navigating online courses is very much a lot of technical support and a model where we had open hours for anybody signed up for an online course could come in and get some of that support. I think it'd be a lower cost and more accessible to all folks in this community. I just want to name, like Mapleton, we stand ready and eager to host some days and evenings courses. We want our students here. We don't always want them on our campus, but transportation can be a barrier. But we think we can connect some of our adults in our community to courses with that kind of like Mondays in Mapleton. There's technical support for your courses. So know that you can call us and we will find a spot. So that just acknowledging the alignment through CTE courses for technical education on through community colleges. The rest does a great job partnering with our Lane County Consortia, who's working to hold in our rural students into really innovative opportunities and to continue to look at how those can branch into secondary opportunities. And then two final things I'm talking fast. Advising and ongoing support. At the high school level, we do a ton of support for families and students accessing resources. Right? We live in a resource light area of the county, and our students and families are facing really high needs, right, for income, transportation, food security. All of those things are barriers. Developing a handoff from high school to community college to say, here's where we got them so far. Here's the supports we put in place and bring them forward. I think we'll get more and more kids into those secondary opportunities. And then lastly, I shared this on a call with Dr. Bulger, our superintendents yesterday, but from Arizona, Maricopa Community College program, colleges has a program, I believe it's called ACES. I was going to look it up before I got here and I didn't. But we had students who applied as going into their sophomore year in high school and took took community college credits through there, had leadership opportunities, and every year the graduation seemed to fall the day before our high school graduation. So we always celebrated the fact that kids had their AA the day before they had their high school diploma. And it was all of our students were first generation families. And I would love to see that type of model come to Oregon and especially rural Lake County. So, thank you for your time, and please call us Mapleton and say something anytime you want to partner. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. Is there any comment?
Yeah, maybe on that.
Oh, we're working on the audio.
Not seeing any comment from the viewers. Thank you all so much. We'll adjourn this meeting and gavel back in at 6 p.m. for our regular session. The April 16th work session will now be called to order. Celia, will you please call roll?
Kevin Allhutter.
Here.
Denise Diamond. Here. Sophie Gibson. Here. Steve Mattel.
Here.
Here. And Austin Holding is excused tonight. He wanted to communicate. He wishes he could be here, that he loves the forest community and fellow workers, and it's politics. We're moving on to local land recognition. Acknowledging speaker for this meeting is Russ Pearson. Russ, will you provide the recognition?
So the Kalapuya people spread throughout Western Oregon. 5 recognized counties currently, or 5 recognized tribes that touch Lane County, and all of them contain some of those peoples, as well as tribal groups as well. They were stewards of this very land for over 14,000 years. Their traditional way of life was forever disrupted. So we always like to start our meeting with humility and reverence for the original inhabitants of the land.
Thank you. We'll be moving on to the adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the April 16th agenda? Is there a second? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay. And it passes unanimously. Please note that the equity lens has been provided for the board's reference. Do we have any questions or comments to the responses to information requests? Seeing none, we'll be moving on to the discussion items. Our first item of discussion is a Florence Center update. President Bolger, will you please introduce the speaker?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Vice President Shelley Dinkum and Dean of Florence and Cottage Grove Centers, Russ Pearson, will provide us an update of what's happening here at the Florence Center.
Good evening, Chair Mulholland, Vice Chair Kevin L. Tucker, President Bulger, President Gibson, and members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to share an update on the Florence Center and our ongoing work to expand Lane Community College's presence on the coast. And as Dr. Bulger mentioned, I am joined today by my colleague, Dean Russ Pearson. There is clear enthusiasm from our students, our employers, and our community members, and for Lane to play a larger role in the Florence region. We agree, and this report reflects concrete steps we've taken in response. Let me start with what's happening just right now. On Wednesday evening alone, the Florence Center is hosting or has hosted an impressive range of activities. An entrepreneurship boot camp led by co-starters. This is a 4-week hands-on workshop designed for small business entrepreneurs. And this program funnels participants into our Small Business Development Center programs. Our Small Business Development Center works here on the Florence Center in Cottage Grove, and also our downtown center and our main campus. A hybrid Writing 121Z course, that's a 4-credit course, and that is a transfer course. So anyone who takes that course can transfer that seamlessly. Wild Writing, this is a continuing education class, a CNA class, yoga and NIA classes. That's just happening right now, so you might hear it right over there, I believe, right, Russ? And NIA is a blend of dance, martial arts, and the healing arts that engages the body, mind, and spirit. OSU Extension is running a course this evening in support of small farmers. And we have an intermediate ceramics class meeting in the art studio. These offerings reflect the diverse interests and needs of our community, credit and non-credit, personal enrichment, and workforce readiness. And this is just on Wednesday evening. For this academic year, let me give you an overview of our enrollment. For non-credit courses, we have offered a total of 56 continuing ed courses this academic year thus far, serving hundreds of students. We had a total enrollment of 279 students in our classes, 244 in winter, and 250 in spring. Our Florence campus leads the way in our continuing education efforts. Examples of classes offered this year include iPhone and Android phone basics, beekeeping for beginners, along with several outdoor ventures, day trips, including salmon celebration at the Time Garden in Elsie, healthy Thai food, a wildflower walk up Mount Pisgah, and lunch at the Renaissance Room. This is all sponsored by the Florence Center. We also work with Colette Travel to offer national and international tours such as on the Amalfi Coast in Japan. And we provided you a list of our offerings. You have the flyer there. In terms of credit enrollment in Florence-sponsored courses, here's a snapshot of this academic year. In fall of 2024, 64 students across 7 credit-bearing courses, plus 6 ABSE GED students, not counted in that total. And that is because ABSE and GED are not credit-bearing, but typically they go on to credit-bearing classes. In winter of 2025, we had 28 students in 2 courses and 14 additional ABSE GED students. In spring of 2025, we have 40 students in 2 courses, an additional 8 students in small subsections shared with Cottage Grove, and 10 more ABSE GE students with their registration still in progress. These numbers don't include additional community offerings held at the center for which we provide space, such as dance classes, bereavement classes, AARP driver safety class, and additional courses provided by OSU Extension. Again, you have a flyer there that you can take a look at. As you are aware, the impacts of COVID and the campus's renovation had a negative impact on our enrollment for a few years. And we are excited about the return of activity on our Florence campus, and we anticipate more in the future due to ongoing and new initiatives and relationship building with our Florence community. I wish to highlight a few initiatives. Our partnership with Peace Health has been especially impactful. The CNA class sponsored by Peace Harbor Foundation is offered at no cost to high school students. This spring, we have 9 students enrolled. 7 of them are high school students whose full tuition and fees have been covered. Adults in the cohort are supported by employers like New Horizons Home Health. We are also advancing the child care workforce development system. Through a partnership with the Small Business Development Center and Quality Care Connections, we provided extensive child care provider training in fall and winter. Coming out of that course that recently ended, Florence, known to be a rural child care desert, will have 2 additional child care providers in operation. Now, this amounts to 100 more children being served within Florence, so that is significant. Lane is also active in regional economic development efforts in Florence. For example, just this afternoon, we participated in the Florence Bridge Lane event, a large-scale community resource fair co-hosted by Lane Workforce Partnership, the Collaborative Economic Development Organization, and the City of Florence. Our colleagues at the Lane Small Business Development Center, Director Dan Collins is right behind me, represented us this evening because we are here. So we are very active this evening. In addition, we've extended access through partnerships like the one with the Mapleton School District pilot. Sue Wilson talked a little bit about that. We offered a free college class outside of the standard spring-summer schedule as part of our tuition-free course initiative that we've been offering for the last few years. We've learned that this flexibility has been helpful to encourage student participation, and this is especially the case with our rural students. Looking ahead, we are guided by direct feedback from Florence residents. We recently conducted a survey of Florence students. This was sponsored by our institutional research department, and we are using that data to shape next steps. We've also re-engaged our Florence Advisory Committee, which met on April 14th. I think that was just 2 days ago, led by Dean Russ Pearson, to help us with annual planning. Members included leaders from across Florence, including the Florence City Manager, Aaron Reynolds, and several others. And I think Sue Wilson was also there, and Andy Kowiak, I think I got that right, and I think he just left, and he was there as well. To close, Lane Community College is responding not only with new courses, but with a deeper commitment to our partnerships in Florence. My May board report will include a detailed description of all of these efforts in Florence so that you could read about them further and learn more about our efforts here in Florence. And Dean Pearson and I are here to answer questions.
Any questions or comments?
Hi, thank you so much for that update.
So I understand that there were 2 students in the childcare workforce training who are now certified. Would that be true? They've got their certification to open childcare?
It's a two-step process. They have to take the training, and then there are some additional requirements working with QCC. Get their childcare license, get their liability insurance. One of them is completely done, the other is still in process. The class just ended a little bit ago, at the end of winter term.
Wonderful. And they're Florence residents, so it's going to stay here, all that wonderful
That's
work?
correct.
That's wonderful. And then I just wondered how many, you mentioned about a survey of Florence students. I was just wondering how many students were able to participate in that survey?
I don't have the exact numbers available. That was recently closed, but I can get that information for you. And we're still gleaning the information from that survey. But that was something that we decided was very important. So we surveyed students who had a Florence address or an identifier. Now, we also know that some of those students are also taking classes on our main campus. So I can look at that in greater detail and get back with you.
That'd be great. And thank you so much for doing that. I think getting that direct feedback is a really good idea.
Yeah, thanks for the report, Dr. Tinkham and Russ. Thank you. It's always good to hear as a board member, like, well, what's happening in Florence? And it's so close, but it might as well be, across the state. So we're glad to be here and glad to hear that information. I have a question for Dr. Bolger, if I might. So I don't have a very good understanding about all the forces that are at work. I understand there's a challenge in getting 4-credit classes here, taught here in the Florence Center. And I'm wondering if you could help me better understand some of those reasons and kind of the challenges in that situation.
I can certainly start this. And then I'll ask Dr. Tinkham to put some fine points and then Dean Pearson to put some fine points on that too. I'll just give you the example of us offering classes in the fall term, I believe it was, credit courses. That certainly came directly from the Florence community, which wanted to accelerate the offerings on the credit side. And so we did the very best we can. I think it seemed to me that we offered 7 credit courses in the fall. And then I'm going to turn it over to them to let you know how many of those courses actually ran the full term and what some of the challenges are and some of the opportunities. I really certainly see challenges, not just as just those barriers, but also opportunities. So I'll turn it over to them to give more detail on that.
So I can give a little bit of a background, but I'm going to ask Russ to help me out here. So we experimented with offering additional courses in the fall, and some of the enrollments of those courses, we did run a full 7. That enrollment wasn't quite as robust as we would like. So we understand that whenever you bring, course scheduling is a bit of an art, and you kind of have to just kind of figure out, what's going to stick. And so we realized that we're going to need to continue to make our community aware of the offerings that we have. And you will notice that we had to kind of claw back a few of the course offerings in the winter and the fall term, simply because the enrollments weren't quite as robust as we would have liked to have seen. Also, I think we need to be very mindful that our community of learners have changed over the years, and students are wanting more online and also hybrid course offerings. So there is a change, and sometimes what students will say, especially when you survey, you might see a difference between what is reported and actual behavior. So that's kind of my experience and how I've scheduled in the past, but I'm going to give this to the dean who really firsthand.
Yeah, I think part of it, we essentially closed to credit in March of 2020. College transitioned in the midst of COVID. And here in Florence, we were able to keep continuing ed program alive, not immediately, but once the college opened back up. But it was almost impossible to do credit because because at that time, we started the bond model. Very invasive. This building was almost stripped to the studs and rebuilt. The other building meant that we had to make all of our offices and any classes that we offered move over to that smaller building. And then we did it again the other way later. We managed to keep a lot of the continuing ed running, but not as much of the credit. We still, during much of that time, we still sponsored some classes. Essentially they were Zoom or online courses. So we still generated some FTE, and we had Florida students that were taking those courses, generally those filled. But as Dr. Tinkham noted, we have a different learning environment than I think a lot of the high school students that have recently graduated, and probably even some of the college level students that are still taking courses as a result of COVID. A lot of folks are a little more interested in online, a little more interested in student-based courses. We're trying to do a little bit of all. I oversee the Cottage Grove campus, you may know too, and we did a little thing this spring term where we calved off some of our enrollment possibility and gave it to Cottage Grove, and they actually initially filled those sections, those little small sections. So that's something we're working toward.
And we're going to continue to experiment and see what our community needs as we come back from COVID and also the remodel.
Not seeing any other comments. Just thanks so much. Really exciting to see folks in the building and the exciting work being done to expand, bring courses back to Lawrence Center. The next item of discussion is a behavioral health certificate of completion. President Bulger, will you please introduce the speaker?
Yes, thank you. This is a first read for the board on a new program. It's a behavioral health certificate of completion. Dr. Shelley Tinkham is going to lead this conversation, and she's joined by a few individuals that I want to introduce to you. One is Dean Phil Martinez, and the other two individuals are faculty members, and they're on Zoom. And so we have Susan Shipp and also Aaron McGladry. Turn over to you, Dr. Tinkham. While you're doing that, I think I just looked at my notes and I missed Dr. Jennifer Fry, who actually is going to be part of this conversation as well. So didn't mean to oversee you.
Thank you, Dr. Bulger. You have introduced everyone, so I don't need to do that. According to the Oregon Health Authority, Oregon is facing a severe shortage of behavioral health providers and recommends alternative career pathways in order to increase the number of individuals who are qualified to enter the field. So the program that you have in front of you today is in response to this recommendation. It is a certificate of completion in behavioral health, and it is drawn from existing coursework from within the Associate of Applied Science and Human Services. The people who worked on this program. This is, Phil Martinez, Associate Vice President, Jennifer Fry, and faculty members, and Aaron McGladry and Susan Shipp. I'm going to hand this over to Dean Martinez, who is going to say a few words, and hand this over to the faculty who developed the curriculum.
Thank you, Vice President Tinkham, and thank you, Board, for having us present this to you this evening. As was already presented by Vice President Tinkham, there is a severe need for behavioral health workers in the state of Oregon, actually nationally. And as a result, getting feedback from our advisory board and from our local employers and partners, the human services faculty have been working to develop several different pathways and initiatives. And the certificate you have in front of you is the latest one that we're developing or have developed. And with that, I'll turn it over to Susan and Aaron to explain the details and answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil, and thank you to all of you for the invitation to be here. We are excited about this certificate and the opportunities that it presents to Lane students and to our community. So the overarching goal of this certificate is to be a stackable credential within the Associate of Applied Science degree in Human Services. And that broadens the job opportunities for our students completing the degree. It also, we envision that this is a forward-facing certificate, which will enhance enrollment and help students, community members, recognize their path at Lane. I'm going to pause and Erin will chime in.
Yes, and we've already found with our career pathway certificate in addiction studies that students come in with these certificate programs, these 1 year-ish programs, and build confidence that they could be a student and start seeing themselves in different ways. And so we hope this will also be a pipeline into our associates and beyond by creating this need. The other thing is that we have 2 major behavioral health units coming into Lane County. Peace Health has already been pulling hundreds of partners together to strategize around. They anticipate 300 plus new workers being needed. There's 24 new adolescent beds in a facility called Timber Springs, and there'll be 96 total beds for the adult unit. So there is a career pipeline, and we are looking at cooperative education sites where supervisors can provide the kind of supervision that will lead to careers and other certifications within the state. Susan, anything else you would add?
Right. I think the only piece I would add, you've had the opportunity to look at the proposal. This certificate is embedded, if you will, within the Associate of Applied Science degree. So these courses are already built into that associate degree. And again, a milestone of completion and certification. Well, excuse me, not certification, but completing the certificate, which will certainly be able to, put that on their resume as they continue opening doors in the workforce.
Thank you so much.
And certainly part of a much broader scope.
Any questions or comments from board members?
Thank you so much for all faculty, staff, managers who work on these kinds of certificate programs, which are so important. If I understood correctly, I think it was 26 units and the list of courses. I think towards the end, so to say, there's hours, sort of like internship hours that are required. Did I understand that right?
That is correct. So they need to be placed in a behavioral health field, receiving supervision. But the scope of that could be with youth, could be with adults, could be with folks who are unhoused, people with dual diagnosis, substance use, and mental health. There's a wide range.
Yeah, and that was going to be part of my question, because I understand from experience, especially in nursing programs, that sometimes that placement becomes the challenging part because it has to be supervised, right, by law, and just having enough opportunities for placement. How do you see that?
Yeah, you can speak to that. We actually have our advisory committee coming up in 2 weeks. We've already talked to them earlier this year, but we have a specific agenda item for them to generate active supervisors on sites right now. And we'll need to stay up to date as funding around Medicaid could change. But our advisory committee is great in helping us locate sites that are active with the proper supervision.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, does that sometimes also connect or
transportation, right? Because I mean, that is an off-site, an off-campus relationship where students need to be able to get there, right? To put in their hours.
Many of our behavioral health sites are located downtown on the bus mall, within the bus mall. And then for students who have disabilities that cannot ride the bus, then the Ride Source is an option for them.
Great, thank you so much.
So I know we already have a lot of students that are on the degree pathway for addiction studies. Could you tell the board a bit more about what you're doing to connect the students that have already done a lot of the work for this to this certification, please?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that question so I'm understanding about the career pathway certificate in addiction study in relation to the behavioral health?
Yeah, because it's sounding like there's courses that you need to take to get the certificate that are kind of coinciding with this degree pathway of addiction studies. And I mean, the classes fill up quickly, so we have a lot of students that sound like they'll, be able to get qualified for this. So could you tell us a bit more about what you're doing to get the students that are already taking these courses and already have those course qualifications connected with this certificate?
Well, so the career pathway certificate in addiction studies meets the educational requirements for CADC certification at the state, and additional requirements are beyond that. Those courses also live within the Associate of Applied Science degree. Similarly, the behavioral health certificate, those courses live within that. And how we, if I'm understanding the question, so help me, Erin.
I don't think we can mark it yet until it's fully approved. And I think that's the part, is how are we going to get the word out to students? We haven't been able to do that yet because it hasn't fully been through all of the processes.
And how we are doing it now is through our human services courses. And so we're working cautiously until we have, approval to let students know this is what we're planning, this is what's being proposed. And so all of the faculty are, bringing this forward to our current students. And I think as soon as we have the green light, then we have, we have that marketing, promotional piece that we can implement. Yeah, please.
May I attempt to address this? So the degree and the CADC courses stack. So there are a number of courses that a student who is in the CADC program, the addiction studies program, and get that certificate. And even if they leave and get a job as a CADC 1, they can return to LCC, or they continue if they're a current student, and many of their courses will already count towards the certificate you have in front of you. So I believe that certificate is approximately 45 credits. So courses like Human Services 201, which is Introduction to Human Services, and I think it's our 155, but our Personal Effectiveness for in the Human Services Workplace course. I believe our Multicultural course for human service workers. All three of those, and there may be others, reside in both the CADC 1 coursework as well as in as well as in the one-year certificate. So the courses stack approximately, and I may not have the exact courses right, but there's going to be some overlap. So the idea is that if you have your CADC coursework done, but you don't want to be restricted solely to addiction programs, you can return for the one-year certificate, continue to the AAS, and that provides a broader range of employment opportunities. And not to take too much time, but it's hard for me to talk about this program without sharing with the board the incredible amount of recognition and support we receive from our not only our local partners, but also our MACBO, which is Mental Health and Addiction Certification Board of Oregon, and OHA have for our program, where we actually are considered perhaps the best human services program in the state. So we're quite confident with their advice and encouragement that we're building this properly.
I just want to say thank you for doing this. This is a great opportunity. I know that Oregon Health Association has been trying to move these kinds of projects forward, knowing that we have such a dearth of healthcare providers. And I know even the field that I work in, we've been asked about this too. So I'm just really excited. And also being a cert holder from the University of Oregon, it really does help in really furthering your education. So I'm really glad that Lane Community College is doing it. So congratulations. Thank you.
Agreed, very exciting work. Thank you for each of you for presenting today. Quick question, can you speak to the job prospects and salary potential of people that are in this degree?
I think Dean Martinez would be the best person to start that question.
I'm going to punt it over to Susan pretty quickly. She's the one who did the report, I believe, on this. I do want to say that one of the reasons we have a dearth of mental health workers and a dearth of ECE workers and a dearth of primary and secondary teachers is that despite it being 2025, these positions are still seen as women's work, and they are massively underpaid and undersupported by the federal government historically, not just currently. So wages are relatively low, but I know that Susan did that investigation in preparation for this certificate, so I'll let her answer it in more detail if she can.
Go ahead, Erin. I'm looking at the proposal and watermark, so go ahead and start us off.
I can start with, so according to ONET, which is our official Oregon database for jobs, they are what we hear to bright outlook, which is the highest level of need in the community. So there is a huge pipeline, like I said, with these two behavioral health units, but they're also understaffed in general. Phil referred to the low wages. I think that's going to, and I agree with that. The other part is many of students who are attracted to this work have lived experience, and what they're doing is transitioning out of jobs that they could not physically do for much longer, or maybe even now. And so this, even though it isn't, maybe the wage isn't as high, it is a step out of a type of work that they can no longer do. A lot of our folks come from wage labor jobs where they're installing cabinets or doing landscaping or being physical care providers or working at hotels. So this is just another way to get into a field that they can do longer term and start moving up once people see their skills, but they're coming from different sectors.
Thanks so much, and thanks for speaking to the need to properly pay our mental health behavioral health workers in society at large. And it's a bigger conversation than we can talk about here, but thank you so much. And any other board member? Not seeing any.
Again, very quickly, I'm going from memory, but I believe the starting wage is $22 to $26 an hour. These are entry-level human service positions, so they're not highly compensated, but they are improvements, as Aaron pointed out, to the current circumstances that our students face.
Steve, it looks like you have your hand raised.
Just wanted to thank folks for the presentation and the materials, and let you know that I plan to support it when it comes up for a vote, presumably next month.
Great, that is the end of that presentation. Thanks again. The next item on the agenda is a biannual enrollment retention report. Alger, will you please introduce the speaker?
This is our second enrollment and retention report for this year. Dr. Colin Joyce, Vice President of Student Affairs, will present this report. What we're going to focus on tonight is LCC's 2024, also our full-time equivalent, and how those compare to previous years, so the board can see that information in some context. Dr. Joyce.
Thank you, Dr. Bulger, Board of Education, and I'm glad to be here with our Florence and Mapleton community members. Really glad to be here. First of all, I wanted to bring up that our spring enrollment, so the number of students enrolled this spring at all campuses is up 7.5% over this time last year. Continuing students are up 9%. Returning students are up 1%, and new students are up 1%. And if I could go to the first slide, please. This slide, it covers a 7-year unduplicated headcount of our students. And unduplicated headcount is the total number of individual students who are enrolled. They're counted once, even if they're enrolled in multiple classes. So just to make that clear, because I know it's always a complicated term. College now are those students who are taking free college in the high school by certified instructors. Non-credits skill development would be ABSE, GED, areas like that that are non-credit, but gearing students towards credit, hopefully at some point. And non-credit continuing education covers areas like phlebotomy, massage, yoga. They're kind of standalone and kind of terminal type programs or courses. So if you look at this 7-year trend here, you'll see that, prior to COVID, 2018, we were much higher in our student enrollments. Over the next couple of years, they did drop significantly, and especially over COVID, 2020, 2021. And we are seeing in all areas, in credit classes, in college now, non-credit skill development and non-credit continuing education, we've seen slight increases over the last year or two, since kind of a low of 2022. This is, I think, a good trajectory, and hopefully will continue moving in this direction. There's a lot of things going on federally that we're keeping an eye on, but this is kind of where we are right now. And I'm going to move to the next slide. This one is FTE. It's an interesting looking graph. Again, it's a 7-year trend. FTE is full-time equivalent. It's calculated by the number of contact hours that HEC classifies as reimbursable. And about 99% of our classes at Lane Community College are reimbursable. And so if you look, again, this gives you, I think, a pretty clear, a similar kind of a look. If you look back at year 2018, you can see that non-credit, the classes were fairly higher at that point than they are now. We're really starting to come back as it comes to FTE, but we were We need to make significant improvements in non-credit to kind of improve our overall FTE over the years. And so our credit, we went down pretty strongly for a while, but our FTEs now are rising, so our full-time equivalent. And again, FTE is what we receive funding from the state for. Most of our funding comes from tuition, but part of it comes from the state. And with our new funding formula, the more we can see an increase in FTE and completion and credit certificates, first-gen students, students getting 15 credits, 30 credits, or for particular groups, that we can increase our funding going forward. And I think that was about that. It was a short report. Just wanted to open it for questions. Thank you to our speakers. I see Kevin has his hand raised, and then Steve.
Thank you, Dr. Joyce. I want to give a public shout out to the positive trends over time. This doesn't happen by accident. So kudos to President Bolger, executive team, all the staff, all the faculty that work hard every day to recruit and retain students in a post-COVID environment. It would be easy just to like, okay, well, that's great. This is exceptional. And this is one of the primary board interests and goals for this institution, because everything else kind of hinges on enrollment. And so I just want to publicly say thank you. Good job. We hope it continues. I know there are storm clouds. It's kind of hard to read the weather, what's going to happen. Our crystal balls probably aren't working very well. But suffice to say, we're headed into this turbulent time with some positive trends. So that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have to say, it really is all of those professionals in Building 1, Building 19, across the campus, Building 4, the student affairs staff, career pathways, and also the faculty, because retention is up. That's crucial. If bringing in students is one thing, but we need to keep them, and that a lot of that is faculty and support services. So it's the campus working together.
Next, I have Steve.
Well, thank you. Would you be able to pull the slides up again? The questions I have kind of refer specifically to the slides, and it might be useful to be able to see them. Okay, great. Would you, yeah, this one right here will do for starters. So this is Dr. Joyce, a point of confusion that I'm hoping you can help me resolve. My understanding from this is like that we have currently something like 17,000 unique students that over the course of the academic year, the most recent academic year that we have data for. And based on and maybe some as much as 9,000 unique students who are using our main campus. Is that how I should be understanding it? Or I guess I never fully understand that how to interpret the difference between this and the FTE. I would like to know, I guess, is how many students are, on our main campus, the physical campus, during an average term in the last year or so.
This wouldn't show that. This shows all, say for instance, if you look at fiscal year or academic year 2024, it shows in the blue 8,888. That's students who are taking credit classes. That's here, Cottage Grove, downtown campus, the main campus. The other ones are the same for non-credit, and College Now is across our district as well. We could get breakdowns by area, by the campuses to show that separately, but this is overall.
Okay. I don't know exactly what value it is, I'll admit that, but I have this deep curiosity about, how many students were on our campus today or yesterday or last week or in the middle of the winter term And, you know, I would like, when somebody asks me, how many students attend LCC? I don't actually know what to say to that question.
That's a great question, and it also includes, you know, about 30% of our students are entirely online. They could be anywhere in the county, or even, you know, across the state or in another state. So we could look at, we do track students by zip code, things like that. So we could see who's taking classes, which campus, provide that information. That's easy enough for us to gather.
Its value is mostly just, you know, in passing when I'm talking to community members, people will ask that question. Well, how many people are actually out there these days? And it would be great to say, well, you know, 70% are in person, 30% online. The total, you know, number on an average term these days is. And I don't know what that number is, and I get that that's not exactly how we count them up, but I think there's value to being able to share that with our community. These numbers don't quite say that. Again, I get that you're after different things, but there is some value there. And so I'll leave that there for now. The other question I have, so I'm looking at this data, the slide you have up, right, and we see that the non-credit continuing ed, the yellow, is probably, I don't know, responsible for the steepest declines, right, from fiscal year 18 to 24, 8,500 down to 3,500. And of course, all the other areas declined as well, but perhaps that's the area that's declined the most steeply. And I guess I wonder, you know, I'll ask, like, given where we are now and what we're trying to do, how important is it to LCC to rebuild that yellow block to its historical high in roughly FY 18? I'm not so sure. Like, I look at the blue and I say, hey, that's a number we want to get up higher. I'm not so sure about where we're at with the yellow.
Thank you, trustee. Really appreciate the questions. I'm going to address a couple of those questions and ask Kara if she would talk about, excuse me, credit college now, non-credit, continuing education, excuse me, and skill development with respect to our budget and how the board actually takes a look at our budget and how that lines up with those numbers. And then I'll ask Vice President Tinkham to speak to non-credit and how you're thinking about that today.
Yes, those are all great questions. And there's a couple facets to look at. A lot of questions within there, and of the enrollment changes, there's a couple of fold. What we do make on a very generic level is tuition on every student that comes in, especially credit students. So you earn tuition on that. What you also were funded by the three major funding sources, right? That's tuition, property taxes, and then the third one is state, the CCSF fund. Fold. So the property taxes doesn't move much. It's really based on your property tax base. So at most that probably changes up to 4% because it's capped. The second one, the CCSF, is actually capped at a growth rate. So as the college continues to now grow, which is a positive thing, is the state any FTE growth in the calculation at 2.53%. If you want, it changes every year. So what the state does is look at your rolling calculation and says if we grow over 2.53%, we actually don't get additional state FTE credit in there. So they're unfunded FTE, if you want to think about it in a state perspective. So there is an artificial cap, and that cap continues to grow as the 3-year average grows. So just keep that in mind. That's why we say the state funding doesn't grow proportionally to, if we get 6% growth, the state funding doesn't grow 6% for us. So keep that in mind. But what does end up happening is we increase tuition dollars. There's an amount of bad debt that comes in with that particular case, but there's that element too. So tuition is really where you're able to capture additional money, if that makes sense. Does that answer what you're thinking?
Yeah, it does. I guess my comment really is that perhaps the board should work with Dr. Bulger to establish more granular goals with regard to growth, right? We have these sort of vague growth goals, a couple of percent increase over the previous term or over the previous year. I forget exactly the numbers. But we don't break it out, right? We don't say what we're thinking about in terms of increasing our non-credit continuing ed, for example, versus the credit bearing, et cetera. So, and I'm not really clear as to why, what the different strategies might be for each of those segments, what the different costs might be for them, which ones of those might subsidize other areas of our budget. And so there may be there may be a range of reasons. And I don't think as a board member, I'm clear. And I do think that I guess the last thing I'll say is if we do plan to try and bring that non-credit continuing ed, that yellow block back to, pre-COVID levels. I don't know if that's true or not. There's value in having express goals instead of baking it into into a larger goal.
So thank you, board member, Steve. I share your observations and also your concerns. As I recall, the board received, there was a packet of information early on in the fall that did state where kind of our, if we were going to get to that, I believe it was 18,000, that there would be need to increase our non-credit offerings. So that is something that we are looking at to do, in various ways. I have two deans with us tonight that are actually making strides in that area, and that is Dean Pearson, and then also we have Dan Collins from the Small Business Development Center, who are trying to get those non-credit numbers up. And if you look, the trend is going in the right direction. From AY 21, even from last year, we have, roughly about 350 additional enrollments. So this is an area that's really important. One, it's important because it serves our community where our community is at. Not everyone who's coming to Lane Community College is seeking a degree. They might be seeking professional development, and there is a need within that community, within our community, to do that. The providers have popped up since COVID, but it is an area of growth and one that we are looking at. And I don't know if our deans want to talk about some of the successes that they've had in bringing this back.
Continuing ed has been campus here. We have a population that's older than Eugene. And there's a lot of folks who want to stay active, keep their minds active, including me. So we've been able to continue, even through the COVID, to grow the program. Non-credit, and of course, we're entering into other non-credit adventures too, like our things like that. Yeah.
The Small Business Development Center is we have a mixed revenue stream. So we have grant funding and Lane Community College funding. And our biggest inhibitor is grant funding. So we've actually made some systemic changes to try to go after other grant funding, but that changes by the day right now. And we will just see how that goes. What we have done is open up in our rural centers, and numbers are different in rural centers with non-credit. If you look at pure numbers, class size might be smaller. However, if you talk to our rural leaders, the impact is large. So when we talk about adding 2 childcare providers to Florence, that's when they had 4 childcare providers before. So that's a 30% increase, actually 50% increase in childcare with those numbers. So when we look at our county and since we steward public funds and we are working, numbers don't tell the whole story. You need the context of each area as we try to make sure we're doing good development across our entire county for what works in Cottage Grove and what works in Florence. So that's where being connected to Cottage Grove and Florence and our Eugene Springfield centers is really important for local leaders to speak into what we're doing and how we're doing it.
So I'll just end by, I appreciate all the comments. I think what this is queuing up for me is perhaps, a discussion with the full board, of course, but and with Dr. Bulger when we meet in the summer to think about and perhaps and tweak that the small number of goals that we have, strategic goals we have specifically for the president. Right now, we have one that focuses on enrollment, and I think where I'm getting to a little bit is whether we want to make that a little bit more granular so that we're pushing on these subsections within our within our student population. I'll stop there for now. I'll take the conversation with Dr. Bulger, and if it seems like it has legs, we'll maybe find a way to bring it to folks' attention when we meet in the summer to review annual strategic goals.
Thank you, trustee, and we'll certainly be prepared to do that.
Thanks very much. Can we pull up the slides for another moment? So my first question is following up on that max growth rate of 2.53%. So this year we've had a 7% growth rate. So our state funding, we're only getting basically a third of the benefit of that enrollment growth. And so next year we would get another 2.5% based upon this increase that we have this year. If we maintain that increase, how long would it take us to actually get the state funding equivalent for the enrollment increases that we've seen?
It depends. So the state changes what that cap is every year. So until the legislature convenes and the HEC comes out with what the growth rate is, the last session, and maybe Brett can give more brain power to when they make that decision, but they capped it at 5%. Somehow it ends up being 2.53 each year this last biennium, but it's been different. So they set a different cap each year on what that would be. And when you look at the trends of all the community colleges, there are some community colleges, if you look at our numbers for last year, the enrollment beyond what we're giving credit for FTE is 202. But there is one college that's a lot smaller than we are, that theirs was 500. And then there's a larger college that, gained, there's like a cap where they give you one of two rates. It's either your growth rate maximum or cap you at what you were the previous year. So it's hard to get to, because I looked at the pattern after actually one of our last conversations with the board of how does that affect? It's going to take at least 3 to 6 years for us to start moving that needle, and we would have to beat out all the other community colleges and have them decrease by each year to even start moving that 8% to 9% to 10%. So it's a pretty lofty goal, the way it's structured.
Thank you. And I'll probably follow up with you after. It just, I think we're in a situation where we might be the victim of our own success, that if we're growing our enrollment and that's increasing our cost of providing services, but our local property tax isn't growing and our state revenue isn't growing to measure it with that enrollment increase, I just want to make sure we're being careful to be successful with all aspects of our budget and our enrollment growth. Looks like President Bulger wants to say something, so I'm going to let her interject.
Thank you, Chairman Mulholland, and for all of your comments as well. And we'll certainly take those into consideration and have further discussion.
Thank you. And then on this last slide, just looking in at the College Now, just very excited that we're going to have a discussion at the board in the next month or two, hopefully, around opportunities to expand College Now, expand our partnerships with K-12 students, and just very appreciative of the work that's been going into building those partnerships with K-12 and figuring out how we can get back to levels we've seen previously with that really important work that we're doing in the community. Any other questions or comments from board members? And Sina, just thank you so much for all of our staff.
Austin, I have a quick follow-up. Or sorry, I'm sorry, Zach, I have a quick follow-up.
Go ahead, board member Mittal.
Yeah, I want to try to break my habit of focusing on continuous improvement and not taking the moment to celebrate the successes as Kevin did. So I just want to join Kevin in thanking, Stephanie and the staff and all that for bringing us ultimately what's a really good news story, right? We're bending the curve back in the positive direction. And I, like others, I think really appreciate that. So thank you.
Yes.
Realize I hadn't said anything. I should say something. Thank you, Steve, for reminding me. And I want to just acknowledge the growth and also the concern about the not getting funded for the growth. So, thank you. I'm really excited that the numbers for enrollment is going up and that more students are on our campus. Thank you.
All right, and I just want to say one last thing. I came to campus just about 2 years ago, and prior to me arriving here, President Bulger had set up a group to work on enrollment first and foremost, and that's what started the trend. And so the teams are just working nonstop since then to keep that as the focus. Yeah.
So just to clarify for myself, when we talk about non-credit, who sets the tuition for non-credit? Because we also have these travel opportunities, right? I mean, there's a wide range, right? I know I've taken the NIA class and that's pretty reasonable, but I'm just wondering, because we're talking about maybe income, right, that has quite a few variables in it, and yet we're trying to talk about how that's an opportunity for increased income.
Well, I would say the for non-credit is set, it's a program specific fee. It's obviously not set by the board. And I can give this over to Dean Pearson, who does this work individually, and he can probably answer that for you.
There's some non-credit programs that do qualify. So that is something we take into consideration. And then in terms of how we set the cost for, the continuing community education, some of the classes that I know you're taking, Denise, those are set in collaboration with the instructor, how many students they expect. Those kinds of classes are usually a collaboration with that instructor to be sure that enough students and some faculty, non-credit faculty often develop a following and be helpful to the college and to themselves for a long time. So it's a bit of a two-way negotiation with the instructors.
Not seeing any further discussion. Thanks so much to our presenters, President Bulger. And a final comment. I was very happy that earlier this year we were able to approve the year-round enrollment retention system. I think having students be able to enroll in classes up to a year in advance is absolutely critical to our ability to expand enrollment and retain students. And so just want to express appreciation for the standing up of that program. Okay, the next topic of discussion is board policies. President Bulger, will you please introduce the speaker?
Yes, I'll introduce the topic as well. The board may know that we bring back board policies for a first read, and that's what we're doing tonight here in the work session. Brett Roulette is going to discuss some of the policies that we're bringing today. So Brett.
Good evening, Chair Mulholland, Presidents Bulger and Gibson, and members of the board. This evening, I bring before you 4 board policies. One should be familiar. It's been before you a few times. This evening, we bring back board policy 275, interfund loans. This time, staff recommendation is to keep language unchanged. I know there has been a lot of questions, a lot of concerns about potential changes. And Vice President Plath and I had a discussion along with President Bulger, and we felt it was prudent at this time just to move this policy forward unchanged, but do know that in the future, since it is a best practice to look at non-restricted funds for potential inter-fund loans, if in the future that's necessary, or it would be a recommendation from staff to consider, we could bring that to the board. The same vote count that's required to approve a loan is what would be required to make a change of the policy at that time. So, but in the meantime, we felt it was prudent to move this policy forward with no changes. However, I did want to point out that as you're aware, we have been adopting OCCA policies since about 2019. The board has been transitioning from some legacy policies that were designed under a different type of model for a policy system. It was the Carver model, and the OCCA model follows a policy library that was in place for the California systems of community colleges. And so the difference is that the Carver model that we were using had an 8 chapters that used 3-digit policy numbers. The OCCA model has 7 chapters and uses 4 digits for policy numbers. So now that the board has, since 2019, made its way through all of the existing LCC legacy policies and made decisions over which ones to keep, which ones to replace with OCCA policies, and then in some instances merge the policies together, we're now going to recommend renumbering some of those 3-digit policies that the board has retained to give them 4-digit policy numbers that would allow them to be placed when you go in board docs and look at our policies, into the 4-digit chapters that is the OCCA library. And so OCCA, when they designed their policy library, they knew that many colleges would retain existing policies that they had, and their numbering system was intentionally designed to allow colleges to take old policies and put them into the new model with different policy numbers. Are there any questions on the renumbering of policies before we dive into the 4 that are in the packet this evening?
It's more of a request. I'm losing the visual of where all of these renumbered policies will fall. So when you bring this back to us for a vote, it would be great if I could see your chapters, that says 2,400 and BP 375 is now 2,401. Like somehow you see where they're going to fall.
Yeah.
So they don't lose track of what they are and where.
We can do that.
Thank you.
All right, and so for the first policy then, board policy 275, interfund loans, we do not have suggested revisions for that policy other than renumbering it to board policy 6255. Yes, Chairman Holland?
Would you like us to ask questions now or at the end?
Whatever your pleasure is.
So I think two clarifying questions. Does the college foresee asking the board to does the college foresee a need to make a loan from the retirement account this year? And would it be for the 8th quarter payment or for other purposes?
Vice President, answer that question.
Hello, we do not foresee requesting an interfund loan this year for any of our funds. We don't anticipate any of that at this point, and we don't anticipate entering into a TANS loan or any other loan for the 8th quarter payment this year.
Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it.
All right. 3 new policies for you this evening for their first read. The first one is board policy 312. We recommend retiring. Board policy 312 was last reviewed in October of 2019. In December of 2020, the board adopted an OCCA policy, board policy 2200. And that policy includes all of the language from the existing board policy 312, along with some new language the board added at that time. So at the moment, you have 2 policies, one with a couple additional sentences, but other than that, identical language. And so we're recommending retiring board policy 312 and retaining board policy 2200. For board policy 325, the college governance system, we have no suggested revisions for that policy at this time. We are recommending renumbering it to board policy 3240. And the last policy we bring before you this evening is board policy 370, membership on the Board of Education. This is another one where we recommend retiring the number and adopting the OCCA board policy 2010. The OCCA policy had a little bit additional language around qualifications for board membership, pulled from statute. And as well, staff updated the zone descriptions that were in the existing policy to include the changes that were made following the last round of the US Census and redistricting that occurred.
Any further questions or comments? Okay, I am not seeing any questions or comments. So with that, I believe that is all. Thank you so much.
Zach, I'm sorry. It took me a second to turn my audio back on.
Steve, he's still here, so you can ask your question.
Thank you. So the questions were, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but the one that keeps getting that's controversial, the interfund loans, Brett. So right, as you said, staff continue to recommend the same path forward. There, I believe, have been 3 of us in support of that, and 3 of us who haven't. So we're sort of deadlocked there. I don't know that we're about to change any opinions before the next board meeting. This might become something that it can only be resolved when we have a 7th board member join the board in whenever it'll be in June or July. So I guess my question is if that's the case, and I don't know, of course, that is the case, but it seems that way to me. Is that a concern or a problem for staff? Do you anticipate if we need to leave this unresolved until the summer, does that create any concerns?
Chair Mahalan and Trustee Mattel, the recommendation from staff has changed since the last meeting. The recommendation from staff now is to leave the policy unchanged. That will allow the board to move it forward for a second reading. We'll be able to mark it as reviewed and get it into compliance with your policy with your board policy that all policies are reviewed every 5 years. And if there is a need to readdress the language at a future date, staff will bring forth a new recommendation to the board.
So I think you're pointing out when you say unchanged, you mean the recommendation has changed. The policy as is you're saying let's leave it be.
Correct. Staff has changed the recommendation to now to leave the policy as is.
Okay, sorry. Thank you for that clarification. I didn't understand that until just now. Thanks.
And yes, keep the text as is and renumber the policy.
I appreciate that conversation. I will ask that if the college does foresee a need to request this interfund loan and to change this board policy, let's give ourselves a little bit of time, like 90 days at least, to try and think that through. If you foresee that request coming down, we can try and deal with the board policy, have a little time to adjust, think about things, and really appreciate the work. And if the request is needed, then I think we can have that good solid discussion at that time. Thank you.
That will certainly come to the board because that's part of the board's responsibility, its financial responsibility, and we will definitely do that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. The final item of discussion is public comment guidelines. The Lane Community College Board of Education is considering a public comment procedure to ensure a fair, respectful, and efficient process for community input during board meetings. The draft guidelines outline time limits, conduct expectations, speaker order, and registration procedures, prioritizing LCC students and maintaining decorum in discussions. These proposed rules align with public comment practices of other educational and government bodies, aiming to create a structured yet inclusive forum for participation. Draft guidelines, as well as recommended changes to the guidelines from board members, were included in board docs for the board's review, and I would like to open up the discussion on public comment guidelines. In order to facilitate the discussion, I think the best thing to do would probably be to open up the staff document that was staff's sort of best attempt to capture the conversation from our previous board meeting. And then we can walk through, each of the board members that made recommendations can walk through their recommendations and why they're recommending those changes. And then we can loop back sort of at the beginning and walk through recommended changes after we get the explanations for why they've been suggested. And I will do my best to channel Austin's recommendations since he couldn't be here tonight. So this is the public procedure that came to our last board meeting. We didn't get time to discuss it because there was a number of recommended additions, which we'll talk about more momentarily. But I believe this was 95% accurate capture of what we talked about in the meeting. So I think what would make sense now is to walk through each of the recommended changes from board members. So if we could we go to my recommended changes? There's only one in there, so I can walk through that, and then we'll go to Julie, and then we can walk through Austin's. Yes, please.
Do we have a current policy on public comment? Not this document that proposed, we don't have anything.
No, other than your agenda policy requires you to say the statements that the board is not going to respond to public comment. That's really the only mention in your board policy.
All right, thank you.
Wonder, Brad, can you speak to public comment itself? Public comment is really not required. There's a lot of flexibility around public comment. I wonder if you can speak to that as well.
Historically, there has not been a requirement in Oregon for public bodies to require public comment at meetings. However, there's currently a bill in the legislature that they're considering that could require it at all regular and special meetings. So that's just something to know that is currently in, I believe it's House rules or Senate rules, and it's under consideration. So we're tracking that bill. And we're hopeful the way it's currently written would require it pretty much at all public meetings. And so the pushback from the counties and the cities is that they would like some consideration for work sessions to not necessarily have public comment requirements at every work session. So I guess that does that help? Right now, you are under no legal requirement to have public comment at every meeting.
Public participation board education meetings. AP 2345. The only reason I'm asking is, and I don't like, but the only reason I'm asking is that we've gotten way off course of what originally we were talking about and why we wanted to do this. And so I'm just wondering if maybe there's kind of like an etch-a-sketch that we can shake and clear the screen a bit and then go back to why we were having the conversation to begin with. And if we have an existing policy that talks about public participation in board meetings, maybe we start there. And then we see what's missing or what's not missing based on Zach's comments, Austin's comments. My comments are literally just, let's find something that makes sense that other colleges are using, that, you know, recommendations, things like that, and how to address some of the things that we've been talking about. So that was why I'm trying to find what do we have currently that kind of facilitates what happens at our board meetings. That's all.
Yep, and you are correct. I really apologize. That is board policy 2345. A board policy 2345. Can we pull that up on the screen, please?
That's what the roll.
I'm gonna give everybody 30 seconds.
You might.
Oh, and maybe somebody could read it aloud? No, sorry. That is just too.
Since I messed up, I will do the reading. The Lane Community College Board of Education welcomes public comment in all forms and strives to create and promote a welcoming and accessible environment for public comment and feedback regarding agenda items and other issues of concern. There will be a time at regularly scheduled Board of Education meetings for the general public to address the Board of Education on items on the agenda or on other matters of interest to the public. Members of the public may address the Board of Education either through written communications or by speaking during a Board of Education meeting. Persons wishing to speak shall do so at the time designated at the meeting for public comment. At the discretion of a majority of the Board of Education, the time allotment for public comment at any one meeting may be increased or decreased. Written communications submitted to the Board of Education will be included in the board packet if they are received at least 24 hours prior to the board meeting. Other expectations or guidelines for public comment to the board may be articulated through the board's operating procedures. Claims for damages are not considered communications to the Board of Education under this policy, but shall be submitted to Lane Community College.
That works for me.
So thinking out loud to Julie's point, I think this is the overarching policy, and anything we were talking about would fall under that second to last sentence there about other expectations or guidelines for public comment to the Board of Education may be articulated in the board's operating procedures. And we do need to make sure that if we do put something in our operating procedures, that it is in concurrence with these requirements, or that we would have to change these requirements. Yes.
Thanks. Brett, do you know any details of the bill that's being considered? Because I'm wondering, maybe it's best just to press the pause button until we know more about the process and the likelihood of passing. If it does pass, then we would need to address our policy to make sure it complies.
The way the legislation is currently written, and I do anticipate that we'll see some amendments that would change the language, because there is one language that would require testimony at all public meetings. Then there's another one that defines what a work session is, and that a work session doesn't need public comment. And the fear is that one would pass without the other. And so I think there's an effort to try to merge them together. Both bills right now are very short. Both bills are less than a page each and have very little detail other than public comment shall be required at public meetings. And so they don't appear to be diving into the weeds or getting into too much detail other than requiring that public bodies offer the ability for public comment at regular meetings.
Thank you. I'll just say the existing policy 2345, I'm okay with right now. I think there's some nuances that we've been tinkering with. We heard a fair amount of public testimony and concerns about various possible changes. We do have a letter from the faculty union attorney that's bringing up some free speech issues that I'm not an attorney. I think I have to ask Dr. Bolger, her thoughts about how we should proceed with that concern from the faculty union now that we have a letter. So I'm leaning towards pressing the pause button. But I would like to hear President Bolger, if you could comment just briefly. I'll pass you. Oh.
Thank you. The letter that you're referring to that came from the faculty union attorney was shared with our college council. So you can expect I've not received any feedback or input on that yet, but the board will receive that once I receive it.
Steve and then Denise.
Steve, you're up.
All right. Well, thank you. I am also not feeling a lot of urgency to resolve this issue right now. So similar to Kevin, but I would like to make a recommendation in terms of the process to help get us to any changes that we might ultimately endorse. And for me, I would like to start with the issues, right? So we've just had a reading. Instead of starting with, changes, language changes, I would rather get a clear list of issues or concerns that people have that they feel the current language doesn't adequately address, right? So for example, we have talked a little bit about, when the number of people who would wish to speak exceeds whatever, some threshold, 20 or 30, perhaps we ought to have an automatic reduction in the time allotted per person. So that's an issue. What the exact wording is to manage that is to me a separate issue. And we've also talked, I think, a bit about, I forget what the terminology is, serial testimony, right? Where there's somebody writes a letter that takes much longer than 3 minutes to lead, and 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people get up and read it. And so we might want to address that issue. I'd rather have that list first. Well, what are these issues that we have concern about? And then see if we can get agreement that those are things that we want to address, and then figure out what the language ought to be to more, to articulate our concerns.
Hey, yes, I was going to go in the same direction that Steve just mentioned, but a little bit differently. And by that, I mean, I thought it's interesting, and I wouldn't expect any House bill to actually discuss time. And time was a point of, that's an issue. It's a consideration because all boards who offer and want and understand the value of public comment are also challenged to get their business done. Right. And so where is the balance? And so I thought it was very interesting to provide local government boards and school boards examples, all of which basically have 3 minutes. So time is definitely one of the considerations for a guideline. And I think that's, maybe one of the bigger considerations. I did hear language on our policy 2345 that clarifies that it's agenda items or other matters. And I think that kind of clarifies any questions that were raised about what kind of commentary can be. I thought it was interesting that the policy 2345, if I noted this correctly, said that the majority of board members could come to a consensus about time increase or decrease. And so that allows some flexibility, which I think goes back to the issue of all boards getting their business done, which is their mandate. Right, and within reasonable timeframes.
Kind of some of the same things that Denise said, but I'm just gonna drive it home a little bit. I find it interesting that we went through this circle and circle and circle, and I think part of the problem, I didn't even see this before when I looked at our policies. And Brett, going back to the kind of needing to see this as a whole, I think having the 3 numbers and the 4 numbers all mixed together, there's a board policy section, and then there's an OCCA board policy section. And I realized why my brain didn't see it. And I think we need to reorder that so that we actually don't ever miss a policy like this. And to make sure, that's just me. And so I'm like, because I can't believe none of us knew this was here. And we've had 3 conversations about this. This summarizes in narrative form pretty much the issues that we all talked about. It just provides a little more generic flexibility that, say we get to a board meeting, we've got a controversial issue, there's 50 people in the audience, they all want to speak, and we all look at each other and say, I'd like to make a motion that we reduce the hours to 2 minutes, time to 2 minutes, since we have so many people, so we accommodate everyone. We take a vote, we all agree, and boom, it's done. I mean, I think that's what we all wanted to get to. So I don't think any of us wanted to restrict speech. And the agenda items and topics, I think it's just letting us know what they're talking about so that we can, maybe speak to it. But even that, I'm just not attached to some of this. I think it's more of having that flexibility that we are not stuck with 3 minutes for a 2-hour public session when the meeting's going until 9. So we want to hear it, but God, after a while, it's hard as a board member. We're volunteers too and have work in the morning and school in the morning. And, we want to be able to get through stuff and hear everybody. So, thank you.
Hit the pause button.
if you don't mind, if I could ask the board's preference. Would the board prefer to handle the renumbering of the 3-digit policies as they come up for review each month? Or would you like us in 1 month to bring you a proposal to renumber all existing 3-digit policies, just get them moved over to the 4-digit chapters, and then continue the regular review process?
If we just stuck with the regular review, how many more years would it take before we finished getting through all of the renumbering?
Well, your board policy has a 5-year review cycle, and so we're actually doing very good at getting back on schedule, because we did kind of have a break of policy review when our legal counsel separated from the college, and so we should be by this fall caught up and in compliance with the review of all policies, and so that's the good news. I think it would probably be about another couple of years before we got through all of the 3-digit policies if we just addressed them when they came up for their regularly scheduled review. Otherwise, if you don't want to review the language in each of those policies, but just assign them a new 4-digit number, that's a proposal we could bring to you 1 month instead of bringing the language of policies forth for your review.
Anyone that would like to respond to Brett's question, please do.
I would love that. I mean, just for numbering purposes, just to address what we just talked about.
I would support, comprehensive all at once. Yeah.
I don't have a major preference, so let's talk about how feasible that is and if we can get that done.
Yes, well, that's certainly something that's feasible. Well, that's what we will do. Thank you.
Okay, so I still have some questions about how to help conduct things for the foreseeable future until we do change these policies. So the first question would be, how much time should we allot in the agenda as the starting point, which we would adjust up or down?
Well,
Does the board, well, I don't know, we did 30 minutes tonight. I think traditionally we've scheduled it for 45. I've also heard, having it be longer. So I just wanted to put that out there as a starting question, and then we'll have one more.
so what I'm hearing you say is that we put some kind of cap on the length of public comment in full. So like, for example, only 45 minutes of public comment, is that what I'm hearing?
So as I read the C-2345, whatever amount of time we've placed on the agenda for that item, if we wanted to change the amount of time, we would need a majority vote of the board during the meeting. And so I would say let's put in 45 as the baseline. But if folks have a different desire for a different baseline, then we can discuss.
Okay, I expressed my concern the last time we spoke about this, about having a cap. And I know we want to leave it at the discretion of the board, but again, oftentimes when there are things that directly impact students, we can fill the room with students that have the right to speak, and we don't want to necessarily put a cap on how long they speak for. So if it's in the discretion of the board and they have the ability to change it, I wouldn't necessarily be disagreeant, but again, I think that we should really think about putting a cap on it and how it might not be very beneficial to, students who want to share. So, yeah. Like having perhaps a 2-minute, if there's a lot of people, having 2 minutes only would.
My next question is about reducing speakers' time.
Okay.
Yeah, just start with how much.
Based on what I've read in board policy 2345, it sounds like coming into the meeting, we should probably have a number on the agenda for the science fund. And that if we wanted to change it, it would be through a board majority. It's the existing board policy. Want to do something different.
Zach, can you use the microphone? It's hard to hear you unless you're speaking into the microphone. Thanks.
Great, Steve. What I was trying to say was that as I read board 2345 earlier tonight, that we should be coming into the meeting with the agenda having a specific time amount for comment, and that it would be a majority of the vote of the board to increase or decrease it. This is how I read that policy. And so I guess, can I get a thumbs up, I guess, for 45 as a starting point, and we can always adjust it up or down in a vote during the meeting?
So I just have it's just a logistics thing. I mean, what have we had in the past?
I believe most meetings we put 45 minutes as the,
Okay,
the,
all right.
the
So
placeholder.
it seems like when the chair and vice chair and the president sit down and discuss the agenda and what's coming up, that we've probably heard from students or from faculty or from members of the community that there's something on the agenda that's of concern to them. And so we can kind of anticipate that there might be more. And that might be the time when we put an asterisk by it and say this might come up for the board. And I think that we don't necessarily cap it at 30 or extend it at that moment, but we put a little asterisk by that time because it depends on who shows up in the room. And then if we're going to have this really lovely, generic and flexible policy, I don't want to then start to time it into even more inflexibility. And so 3 minutes on speaker limitation seems to be the default amount for just about everybody in the state. So I think that's our starting point, but that's just it. But other than that, I'm not sure we absolutely have to have it, but I would trust that the chair, the vice chair, the president, when you guys are establishing the agenda, you kind of have an idea. And if you're at a meeting like this where you know it's only going to be 30 minutes, then it changes, so you can time out the meeting more appropriately.
Steve, you're up.
Yeah, I think the problem with a set amount of time, 45 minutes or whatever it is more times than not, that's more than is needed. And so then every other agenda item is off in terms of when people expected it to start. Right. So folks who might tune in because they want to pay attention to a particular action item might end up by showing up late because they thought that public comment was going to go 45 when in fact it went 10. So I would rather see us do largely what we've been doing, which is, the standard 3 minutes per person, and then the change that I think is useful is that when the number of folks who want to speak exceeds, for me, I think it's somewhere in the range of 20, that we reduce the time per person to 2 minutes. And I think that simple adjustment will suffice for some period of time. And we might have to come back to this some period down the road, but that would help a lot. What I do see that happens in the moment, when we have lots of people who plan to speak and we see that it's going to run an hour or more, and there is some interest amongst boards in reducing the time limit, somebody shoots their hand up and says, I'd like to give everybody 3 minutes. And then in that moment, nobody feels like being in a minority to deny people time. And so there is value in having a stated policy up front that when we are going to exceed a certain number of people, we just automatically reduce the time to 2 minutes per person. And it's as simple as that. And everybody understands it. And that clarity will reduce, conflict and tension.
Can we pull up my recommended change to bullet 1 under the operating agreement? So this is what has been my attempt, and I thought this is what we had agreed to last time, was that if we had 20 more individuals, we could reduce it to 2.5 minutes. And then my recommendation was that if there were 30 or more, we could reduce it to 2 minutes. And so this was my attempt at doing what I sort of already started implementing, is that whenever we have more than 20, we drop it down to 2.5. And then my next suggestion would be if there's more than 30, we drop it down to 2. So I guess what I would ask is, does this seem like the right numbers? where we could just sort of have this be the automatic assumption of what's going to happen when we see more than 20 people show up? Or do we need to make a motion, each night, on the fly to reduce people's time?
This seems really agreeable to me. Just speaking my mind, I think it gets like a little bit too specific if we just said like 20 or more individuals, 2 minutes. I think that's easy. I don't think this really has a huge impact past the boardroom, so I think we probably could move on from it if everybody agrees with what I just said.
Thumbs up for that one.
I see Steve in the queue.
Yeah, if you do the math, I'm basically agreeing with, I think that was Sophie, but it was a little hard for me to tell just because the microphone's got some, I don't know, distortion there. Anyways, whoever that last speaker was, I agree. I'd rather go from 3 to 2 instead of an intermediate step of 2.5. If you do the math, and at 20 people, you reduce to 2.5 minutes as is proposed, that saves 10 minutes. Right. And I don't know that we need to have all this argument over 10 minutes. I'd rather say once you get to 20, we reduce it to 2 minutes and that's and leave it at that.
I think that's acceptable to everyone in the room. So we'll just make that the standard practice going forward. And we'll probably want to figure out how to capture this specific item since this is the part that we're saying yes to. And this other stuff is, it sounds like going to be on hold, at least for the time being, until we can have some more conversations about the necessity of doing some of the other proposed changes. Does that sound good to everyone?
Thank you.
I just want to clarify that you're asking me, I believe the board is asking me to bring back a list of items. Did I hear that correctly? I just want to be clear. Sorry. Renumbered list, and we will certainly do that. Thank you.
In the meantime, we have an existing policy that lets the board just say, let's reduce to 2 minutes while we do our first reading and our second reading. Kind of like what we did last time.
Do we need a motion for that, or can we just say, hey, Celia, we got more than 20 people, so reduce to 2 minutes, and that'll just be our standard, and we don't need to vote on it every time.
I would rather we not vote in. We have a set expectation, right? Because if we don't, somebody will look out at the sea of folks who want to speak. They'll see the color of the t-shirts and they'll say, actually, can we, I make a motion to keep it at 3 minutes, right? And then we're making a decision on the fly and nobody's really certain what's going to happen. If everybody understands based on the policy that once you exceed 20 people, we drop to 2 minutes and there's not any more discussion, then it's fine. But if it becomes a show of, political will, who wins, then we end up in a not very good place. So it'd be good to memorialize this in policy.
So yeah, I think it would be good for us to bring back just the first item as an operating agreement, and we can vote as a board to approve that next month.
Thanks. I'm supportive of that. And there's a little voice in the back of my head. Is this what some of the concerns expressed by the faculty union's attorney? Some restriction of time? No. Okay, well, that'd be my only caution.
Yeah, my understanding of the letter is that it's related to control of the content of people's speech, not related to the time. But that it does sound like we will be getting a response from legal counsel related to any potential concerns around free speech. But that was, I believe, related to some of the potential content restrictions, not the time. Okay, well, thank you so much. Oh, I see Julie and, Brett.
I was just hoping to ask a clarifying question of what the board was hoping to get out of this. The existing policy says that you can put this type of direction into operating procedures. So kind of like the outside of board policy. Would you prefer to go that route, or would you like to add it to the policy or we can reference the operating documents from the policy. The thought behind it is just to make it visible to the public if they're looking through your policies for what the board's procedures are.
My initial thought would be to have it as an operating agreement, not have to change the board policy. But I guess my concern is what we have here in terms of reducing the down to 2 minutes. We will still need to vote to extend the time as a board based upon existing board policy. And so I think the question is would we need to adjust because of that reason?
And I'd like to make it as visible as possible, which I think means putting it in the policy and not the operating agreement.
Okay, so we have a little bit of conversations going on that are a little bit different. It's a little bit challenging for us to know how to proceed. And so I wonder if we can bring this back, if you don't want to do that now. But there are two questions that we've got. The one is about, should it be in the board policy or the board operating agreement? We hear two different things around that. And then there was a second one as well, but the first one for sure.
So if I may, I'd like to make a recommendation that the policy be edited to add what we've just agreed on the 3 minutes to 2 minutes, so that a vote doesn't have to be made. It's in the policy that 20 plus people show up, we can go to 2 minutes, and we would go to 2 minutes. If we put it in operating procedures, I'm pretty sure we'll have to say that we're going to take a vote on it. So I would prefer that it be in the policy and not the procedures.
Is that acceptable to everyone, that it would be an adjustment to the board policy? Okay. Seeing thumbs up and head nods. And then, so it sounds like we'll be doing it in the board policy. And then I think the only question that's still in my mind is if we'll still have to vote to extend the amount of time beyond 45 minutes if we have speakers that would, with 2 minutes, but each put us beyond.
What's your thinking? That we should have a majority of individuals on the board who actually vote for that? Is that what you're thinking, Brett?
Well, it depends on the language you put in policy. If the desire of the board is that you don't need to vote, that's what the policy can say, is when more than 20 or more sign up to speak, the time automatically is reduced to 2. Or you can require a vote of the board. It's your prerogative.
Might I make another suggestion?
Please. And I got Julie next. I'm sorry, I've got Denise next.
I think the language just simply state that the chair can acknowledge that there's more than 20 people in the room, and that according to board policy, we will reduce time for each speaker from 3 minutes to 2 minutes. And that's it.
And we will just continue until we finish everybody. That sounds good to me. Okay, thank you all so much. Brett, I think you've got your directions for doing that. So let's check in, and we'll get those finalized before the next meeting and have those on the calendar for.
And Chair Mulholland, the most important is that Celia has that information for the notes, for the minutes. Do you have that? Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, fellow board members and Brett, for walking us through that and getting to consensus on that item. Moving on to closing items, are there any board questions or comments? Vice Chair Tucker.
Thank you. I have a question about Karen Smith's memo to the board regarding official rescinding of old policies and kind of formally recognizing that. And the question I have to President Bolger is, and really to the rest of the board, is there value in having a discussion about the board making a formal passing a motion that would be along the lines of what Karen Smith is recommending? I'm just interested in your thoughts about that.
But I will just say that Karen Smith is the OCCA attorney, and she is very helpful in clarifying process and laws. And so what she has done with respect to the board policy library is to give a little bit of context that predates some of us, actually. To give a little bit of context about how boards are managing the policies that they had before the board policy library and integrating those into the board policy library. I don't know if Brett wants to add anything to that. But I can, okay, well, good. Unless there are specific questions, we'll take those as well.
Okay, I'm not seeing any follow-up questions.
Actually, it's not so much a question, it's a comment. I feel like a little underprepared, I'll be honest, to have this discussion, but what I think I can say is that I am in favor of of the process that results in the most clarity, right? So where if as is suggested by Kevin, we formally retire certain policies because otherwise people don't know which to refer to, or there's more. If that's what's happening, then I'm all for retiring it, because at the end of the day, we need one clear statement on whatever the issue is to refer to in order to work ourselves out of the problems that we otherwise would find ourselves in. So I'll just say, as a principle, I am for clarity. So whichever and simplicity, I guess I would say as well. So whichever approach gets us there is the one I'm going to endorse.
Can we ask, President Bolger, can we ask in your list of renumbering of all the policies that we're talking about, of also in that same kind of list, highlighting ones that we would recommend being rescinded because they're duplicative?
Yes, we can certainly do that. And I'll just give the board just a little bit of background for some of the new board members. When I came into the college 3 years ago, I understood that there was a process to look at the new 4-digit policies in the board policy library. There was always an intention of integrating or sunsetting the 3-digit policies. But the intention when I came in was to move through the board policy library as expeditiously as possible, and then move to the second stage of that process, which was going to be sunsetting those 3-digit policies. As we have been working with the board in the last few months, we understand the need to accelerate this integration and sunsetting process. And so going forward, what I have discussed with Brett is that we will make sure that we do that at every single work session and every single regular meeting when the board actually adopts the policies, that we will change the 3-digit numbers. If we are recommending that the board keeps those 3-digit policies, we will change those to the 4-digit policies. You saw some of that this evening, and we will begin that and accelerate that now to clarify, to be more clear to the board.
Yeah, I see. Did you want to comment, Denise? I think it's Kevin's a second round.
Go ahead. I thought you were still on there.
No, I just want to express more gratitude. So here we are in Florence, and a meeting like this doesn't just happen, with all the technology stuff. So thank you to Russ and your crew. You kind of, on the fly with duct tape and some baling wire, you got the audio that was okay. So thank you. Again, thanks to President Bolger and your staff for excellent reports and being here. Celia, thanks for the great reception and layout. It was wonderful to meet community members from Florence. And thanks for the other staff for making the trip over here. And Denise, you don't have to drive back to Florence tonight. So yay, there's that.
So So I want to thank everyone for coming to Florence, and I do want to place a context on this. There was a community town hall meeting. It was well attended. It was in the Bromley room of our public library. It was convened by Jerry Russ, and there were many community members, some of whom were able to come this evening. And thank you to Sias Law News that covered that and was on the front page with some very good suggestions and comments, including about small businesses. So it was really great to have that representation here. And I think that was also when the ideas percolated about just being very welcoming and the reception and, you know, public comment and all the things that a lot of times it's the little things, right? So all the things that we can do to help each other be inclusive, express our appreciation and gratitude for all the work that everybody's doing. So thanks everyone for coming out. Really appreciate it.
I'll repeat what some of my colleagues have said, which is just simply gratitude for LCC president, LCC staff for making this trip out here tonight possible and for being flexible to add the reception and the public comment period. I think it was really valuable, and I've never seen the parking lot so full out there. So I think it was very successful to invite folks in, and just want to thank you very much. With that, our future meeting dates, please note that our next meeting is an executive session scheduled for Wednesday, April 23rd at 6 p.m. And with that.
May I ask a question about that?
Yes.
Did you just say 6 p.m.?
That is what is in my notes here.
Okay, and is that a Zoom?
The Zoom will be available for that, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
And with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.